Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we've got a new kit to put together. We've got a Tamiya 1850L box truck. The plan is to build it somewhere near the bare minimum, keeping the cost of the accessories down. The only extravagant thing that's going on is the ESC, but even then it's not a super high-end one, but more on that later. If you're familiar with any of Tamiya's 1/14th kits, you'll recognise a lot of bits from the chassis. It shares most of the major bits with the other trucks. The main obvious difference is the big box on the back rather than the coupler. Inside the box we've got the usual Tamiya packing. Now it's not quite up to the older kits with the plastic blister packs on the top displaying the fancy bits, but even so it's nice and tidy and not just a big box full of bags. The first sub-box out contains the tyres, which are on display. The box is taped shut, so there's no chance of anything falling out. Inside the box we have all the metal parts bags under the tray that's looking after the tyres. Right, I think we're going to do what we normally do and move the camera for a wider angle and start laying out all the bits. Here we go then. First out is the cab. Now it's a bit smaller than the other Euro cabs. It's an older truck and it doesn't have the sleeper on the back. This parts tree has the front bumper where the front lights live. Now as always with Tamiya, it's a lovely moulding. There's an awful lot of detail. This bag has two parts trees in, one for the interior bits, so the dashboard, seats and steering wheel. The other one has the chrome bits and a rather nice and delicate looking Mercedes badge. Next we have the big aero box for the roof, along with the retaining clip that holds the cab down. This one has the front wheel arches and side skirts for the regular chassis version. On the box truck we're going to use some nice long bars instead. Here are the windows. Well, sadly they're quite a dark brown, so internal camera FPV wouldn't get a brilliant view. But they are mostly flat though, so we might have a go at using some thin clear sheet to make some new ones. Also hiding in there are the light lenses. Now this is a 27 meg antenna that they like to use on some of the trucks. I don't think it was a brilliant idea back when the kit was designed, and with 2.5 GHz it's really not going to work, and it's not all that scale either. If you've ever built a 3-speed, you'll be very familiar with this one. It's got all the clutches and bearing carriers for the gearbox. Next we've got one of the fuel tanks. Now this kit's designed for the very old Tamiya electronics, so the tank has a set of holes in it for the controls. A bit annoying, as you're left with a rather ugly tank. Something to fix with the 3D printer, I reckon. This one has the other tank, this time with the ESC mount. It's near enough the same as all the other trucks. Now if we end up with an ESC in the load area, we will be able to replace it with a proper tank too. Same goes for the air cylinders. Next we have the coupler, which we don't need, but what we do need are the servo saver parts for the shift servo and the steering parts. It will be interesting to see if by some miracle this kit has less slop in the steering than usual. I can't see that happening though. Here are the rear wheel arches and the air intake. There's also a fair amount of little detail parts like the windscreen wipers. All of course are very nicely moulded. This pair has the side rails that go along the chassis, as well as the mounting bosses for the box on the back. Now because this is one of the older kits, it's got the round battery holder for NiCad and NiMi. The very recent kits, I believe, like the Volvo logging truck, have a square battery holder. Now it's not so much of a problem with this truck, as we've got a massive storage box on the back, so we can always mount the battery in there and not worry about it. Here we have the gearbox case and the axle housing, all standard Tamiya stuff, although I'm tempted to change the axle housing to a Hercules Hobby one, as they look a bit more scale. These silver grey parts make up the box. Now they're a slightly flexible plastic, which is an interesting choice. In this box we've got all the large panels and the corner pieces. The main challenge here is getting in. I don't know how I managed it, but I seem to have started with it upside down. The corner bits are all proper extrusions rather than just angle stock. They should really make for an extremely sturdy box. The side panels and base of the box are aluminium too. There's going to be some real weight to it when it's built. We've got the 6 tyres. Now they're all standard Tamiya ones of course, so they're pretty hard, and they work just fine on a typical layout. But if you're running outside, some softer aftermarket ones might be a good idea, but it is very easy to blow the budget if you're not careful. Here's a couple more extrusions that were hiding in the box. Next there's the wheels, in Tamiya's always ever so shiny chrome, very nice, although I'm thinking we might have to paint them this time, just to be different. Now we're onto the metal parts bags. Now each one's set up to put together a section. So bag A contains all the bits to make up the chassis. Bag B has the front axle and front suspension. Bag C has the rear axle. The D bag has the bits for the gearbox. E I think is for the cab, and F has all the bits for the box plus a few finishing parts. The bulk of all the standard screws are in separate bags marked BA, BB and BC. Not quite as nicely laid out as some of the other Tamiya kits, but as long as you keep a note of where they all are, it's going to go together very well. Here's the accessory bag with the usual cross wrench and Allen key. There's also a tube of liquid thread lock, which comes out more like a gel. It works okay, but I tend to use a proper liquid thread lock instead. There's also a funky little cable in there. I'm guessing it's an adapter if you're using something with the old Tamiya electronics. There's a rather long prop shaft. I don't think it's quite as long as the one in the ground hauler, but it can't be far off. A good old 27-turn silver can, which is okay if you want to race the truck, but we're going to be swapping it for a cheap and cheerful 80-turn, which will really bring the speed right down for indoor use. If you're planning a mix of indoor and outdoor, a 45 or 55-turn might be better. These are the chassis rails, complete with plastic film to make sure they don't get scratched up. Here's the gears for the gearbox, or the plastic ones at least. The metal ones are in bag D. There's a rather large decal sheet with the box art livery, high quality as always, but I think we're going to go with a custom paint scheme rather than recreate the box. And the last thing out of the box is the instruction manual. It's a good thickness, and rather than just black and white, it's got some blue too, making it a bit more colourful than the newer kits. I'm not sure how much it's going to help, but I do like it. So that's what you get in the box. It always looks like a lot of stuff when you see it laid out like this. The boxes in the shops are deceptively small. To make the truck go, we're going to need some other bits and bobs too. Now, I've not received them all yet, they're still on their way. So far, I've got the servos, a pair of all-turn AS700s. They're standard size servos, not particularly fast or powerful, but they do have a ball-raced output, and importantly, they centre up nice and reliably with a very small deadband. The big plus though is you can get them for about £7.50. Next is the ESC. Now you can get away with an extremely cheap ESC, well under a tenner, but the WP1080 is in a different league. It's incredibly smooth with really good brakes that work perfectly for these trucks. And even though they're not as cheap as some, they're still only around 35 quid or so they're not all that expensive for what they are. Next, because Tamiya still insist on using bushings on most of their kits, we have a full set of bearings from rcbearings.co.uk. They're around 20 quid, and they're almost a necessity for a long-lasting truck. The only time you'd build with bushings is if you're not really planning to run the truck at all. Still in the post, we've got a Gould RC 80-turn motor. They're about 8 quid on eBay, and make the truck far more manageable when driving indoors. For control, we're going to be using a FlySky GT3C. Now in stock form it's only got 3 channels, and we can't do the 3 positions to control the gearbox. So we will be having a video on changing the firmware so it becomes an 8-channel transmitter with all the options. Add an 8-channel receiver and you've got a wheel radio that can manage pretty much all the functions to get these trucks running with lights and sound. The transmitter with a 3-channel receiver is about 25-30 quid. And the receivers are just under a tenner. If you prefer a wheel radio rather than twin stick, it's a great way to go. And that just leaves the battery. Now I'm going to be using a 2-cell LiPo. Now round packs kind of fit in a battery holder, but they almost always need some light butchery to get them in. A 6L 9mm pack will fit perfectly, but I haven't seen a good 9mm pack in years. All the recent ones I've tried haven't really lasted very long at all. Well, if you've ever seen the inside of a Tamiya kit before, there's no surprises in this one. It's all good stuff. We will be going through the build over 5 or 6 videos, then looking at the mods and the upgrades. There's only one slight oddity with this build, as I'm filming it's Wednesday, and on Saturday I'm off to the Retro Truck Show at the British Motor Museum to display with the Swindon RC truckers. That means I've got 2.5 days to get it running, while also trying to fit in some actual work. As a bit of a time saver, I'm going to paint the cab bits straight away off camera so they're ready to assemble in a couple of days. I don't usually like painting when the parts are untested. I always like to do a dry build first, but this build there's just not enough time, so we're going to have to risk it. So the next time you see all these bits, they're going to be painted and ready to fit. Well, there we go then. That's the Tamiya 1850L deboxed and ready to build. It might not be the newest kit around, the date on the manual says 1996, but the Tamiya kits are always great builds. It's rare anything really needs modifying right away, so you can go on and enjoy the assembly. Right, that's it for this week then. As always, thanks for watching. Like if you liked, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a message if there's something on your mind. Bye guys!